Joining me now is Doug Lute. He's a former U.S. ambassador to NATO. Ambassador Lute, let's start with the status of the Russian military right now. And it seems as if it didn't go well. Obviously, he's got to alter his plans. It could get more brutal. It could get more violent. It's going to be a lot harder to sit back and watch, isn't it, as a NATO member nation, no matter who you are, if it gets as brutal as some officials seem to expect. Is that what you expect?
Well, Chuck, I do expect to be more brutal. Look, we should appreciate that we're in the very early days, just a few days into this, and we should expect this to be a long, protracted, brutal campaign. I mean, if we want an example of what the Russian regime is capable of, we should think back 20 years to the campaign they took to their own Russian citizens in Chechnya. And look at the pictures of the city of Grozny, the capital of Chechnya, from 20 years ago. They leveled it. You can imagine that kind of city fighting, mass bombardment, disregard for civilian casualties. That's what's bearing down on Kharkiv and Kyiv now. If given a choice, Putin will double down before he backs down.
His decision to amp up his nuclear posture. I read one analysis that said the U.S. should be careful not to over-respond because that's exactly what Putin wants, that he's trying to take the focus off of the fact that he's failing in Ukraine and he wants to make this a war with the United States, a war with the West. How do we balance that and still make sure we're keeping an eye on the idea that the thing we've always feared is a madman with a nuke? What if we suddenly have a madman with a nuke?
Well, look, I think the administration, the Biden administration's response to this has been spot on, and that is very prudent, not escalatory in any way, and just reassuring that the American deterrence posture, our nuclear force, is safe, it's secure, and it's effective. That's the right way to go here. Somebody's got to be the adult in this room. I think what we'll watch very carefully now going forward is to see if President Putin has any actions that match this increased readiness level of his nuclear forces. You know, there are 4 levels of nuclear readiness in the Russian system. They just move from the normal status quo level 1 level up. We would now expect to watch for movement of warheads. Does he put nuclear armed submarines to sea? Does he disperse nuclear capable bombers? Does he change protocols in the command and control network? So these are things that are knowable, they're seeable, and we'll watch this very carefully.
Do you think he is a rational actor right now, or do you think we have to assume that he might not be?
Well, I think there's some disturbing signs. But one thing that is clear without debate is that he's an isolated actor. He has placed himself at the very pinnacle of this autocratic regime. I don't know that he has any trusted advisors who are willing to give him dissenting views. And that alone, that isolation at the top, is dangerous.
So this is what you can't help but wonder. You know, 3 or 4 days ago, there was concern, hey, these sanctions might not be tough enough. It might not strangle the Russian economy enough. It might not move Putin. Now there seems to be a reverse fear. Wait a minute, he's really feeling cornered. Boy, the Ukrainians have been a much tougher resistance, and the economy's getting choked off. Oh, and by the way, this turned out to be unpopular at home. It's that feeling of feeling cornered and humiliated. What's the exit ramp for him now?
Well, it's not clear. He's burned most of the exit ramps that might rely on diplomacy. It's quite clear that given the events of the last weeks leading up to and then through the invasion itself, that no one's going to trust Vladimir Putin. He's also led himself into a pariah state status, both politically and economically. So there are no clear exit ramps now. This will now become the art of diplomacy and the art of trying to give him a way out while keeping him under the pressure of the sanctions and the political isolation. That's a tough call.
I'm curious to walk that line. Let's say Helsinki said today, we want Finland in NATO. And the Helsinki government said, we're applying formally. I had Admiral Stavridis on my podcast, and he said, you know, if they applied on a Wednesday, NATO should approve them on a Friday. First of all, how fast do you think the process would work with Finland? number one. And number two, how walking that line of would Putin view that as escalatory by the West, even if we're doing it in response to a nation in distress?
Well, the question does start rightly with the Finnish people, right? And I understand the Finnish parliament is considering this topic now, and that's appropriate. That's where all NATO membership questions begin. It might start on Wednesday and ends on a Friday, but I don't know that Wednesday and Friday would be the same
all
week.
Right.
So it may take a bit of time to deliberate. But what's quite clear, if you go into the Washington Treaty, the NATO treaty from 1949, Article 10 outlines what qualities a new member, an aspiring member must have. And it's quite clear that Finland meets those qualifications. So really the first step begins with the with the Finnish people. And then interestingly, may well spill over and have a similar effect in Sweden next year.
Yeah, one would assume if one comes, the other is likely to come as well. Ambassador Doug Lute, appreciate you coming on, sharing your experience and perspective with us, sir.